Or it's already been a huge pleasure to meet you all and hear so many first thoughts about power and what soft power might be. I would say that everything I've heard so far is going to create this, ecosystem, if you like, of hard and soft power. And the idea of tonight's presentation is to trying to find some kind of power literacy for ourselves, so that by the end of the evening, maybe we can think of some clear distinctions between hard and soft power. And also, who knows, we may get to the point where we feel that our use of hard or soft power can have an impact not only on our own lives, but even possibly on the wider world that we're all taking part in. So I'm going to share a PowerPoint with you. Forgive me for that, but I always think images do a lot of work where words are never quite enough. But I'll be talking you through them. So just a little bit about myself. First of all, so I'm a psychosocial therapist, and I'm what I call a political entrepreneur. And just to cut a long story short, from a very early age, when I experienced a lot of loss in my life, my brother dying when I was very young, and 6 of my mother's 7 brothers and sisters dying while I was in my teens, it became my kind of core pursuit to understand where is my agency as a human being, where does my power actually lie? Because when I was young, I was just experiencing things happening to me all the time, and that even in my relationship to higher powers, whether it's my parents or to God, I felt that I had no relationship to that power, and where could I find a relationship to that power? And so in the course of my life, I've done a lot of traveling along that path. I've written a book about soft power. I've done a lot of work in the world of peace and conflict transformation. And I've worked in psychosocial therapy, eventually ending up in politics. And I'm now looking at power from the point of view of politics. And as I said, I'm a political entrepreneur. But I want to bring us all into this original distinction between hard and soft power, which was named really by a guy called Joseph Nye in America in the 1990s. And he was working in the 80s, but he started to talk about it very categorically in the 1990s. And what it was really looking at was, at that time, an era, a moment in America's history where America felt that it had lost its power in the world. In the eyes of the world, it had been humiliated, really, by the Vietnam War, which was a very tiny country, and America was the only superpower, really, and had been defeated in war by Vietnam. It was quite a moment and spectacle of difficulty for Americans, and there was an existential crisis, in a sense, as to what it was, whether or not they could continue to be the most powerful nation on the planet. And Joseph Nye, said, yes, there may be a crisis here in terms of hard power. In other words, our military has proved ineffective, and we haven't been able to use money to get ourselves out of that mess. And even, sticks and carrots, sanctions, incentives, all the different ways of coercing this other power haven't worked. However, Joseph Nye assured the Americans that because of their soft power, they would continue to be globally dominant. And this is what he described as soft power. It's the power of attraction. So imagine that, it was such a bold claim, really, that America would always be the most dominant nation globally because of the way that American culture and the American dream attracts people towards it. And when people are attracted towards America, they'll come to visit, they'll spend their money, they'll try to have trade deals with you, etc., etc. And Joseph Nye, of course, was right about that. So the nature of American soft power, or the American dream, was captured in the Statue of Liberty and the Constitution, but also through Hollywood, you know, the ability to show the world American values, American state of modernity, if you like, American brands. You know, it could draw people towards America in a way that no other country could. And that was really the source of American soft power. So, you know, we're quite familiar in a way, increasingly familiar now with the idea of soft power as being a story that you can tell about yourself. And it's carried, you know, in propaganda, with charisma, with promises. It captures the imagination. And I think we're all would be able now to think about how that is happening right now across the globe. On the one hand, the attempt to capture the imagination, but also possibly the failure to capture the imagination. That is also going on for America at the moment. And I happen to know that Joseph Nye's just written an essay and is going to, you know, be talking quite a lot about America's loss of soft power in this crucial time. No longer do people believe that it's the only place in the world where you can be free, or where whoever you are can become president. These myths are currently being exploded globally, and even though America may still be a very wealthy country, its soft power is definitely plummeting globally at the moment. And we'll see, you know, which of those kinds of power is more important in the long run. So just to begin with, I wanted to introduce this idea of power literacy. And I want to, first of all, the first important thing I want to say is that please let go of the idea that hard power is bad and soft power is good, because that is simply, that's a false idea. Soft power can be used for good and for bad. Hard power can be used for good or for bad. And in this early diagram here, you can see some idea of how, you know, different kinds of actions and different kinds of ways of being, that many of which you have already described. I mean, I've heard you say quite a lot of these things here that are on this diagram. You can see that there's a kind of a continuum between hard power on the left and soft power on the right. So along the line between something that is coercive and forces outcomes to something that attracts outcomes, there are many things that are somewhere between those two poles. And then on the other axis, this idea of using power to dominate, using power to, you know, power over other people at one end of the continuum, and at the other end, using power for people, using power to empower. So if you put these two axes against each other, you can see that many of the ideas of power or expressions of power that you've already mentioned, some of you, can find their way onto this map. But whether they're good or bad, or whether or not they are to be desired or not, is really a question of whether you're using power to dominate others or whether you're using power to empower others and yourself. So this is just the beginning of that power literacy. But that was 20 years ago when Joseph Nye, 30 years ago, when Joseph Nye was talking about a post-Vietnam era. We're in a very different world now. And in the time in between, I think we've been in a bit of a revolution ourselves, ever since the birth of the internet and the growth of the internet, in which people have you know, connected with each other. They've come to see themselves better in the public space. they've got access to infinite amounts of information. Our power, the number of different forms of power that we have not only made us more active in the world, but has also made us a lot more aware of the mess that we're in. So I would say at least these three terms, I don't know if you're familiar with them. Permacrisis really refers to something that's not going to go away. The state of our environment is not something that one could just fix. The polycrisis really refers to how the many different kinds of problems interact with each other, creating what we call more wicked problems, problems that are not easy to solve. And then the metacrisis is about how we think about these things. Thinking about problems is also a huge, being able to think about things in a much more complex way is a lot to do with the exchange that we've been able to have over the last 30 years through the internet. So where does soft power and hard power then land in this arena of permacrisis, polycrisis, and metacrisis? So again, our own understanding of where our power lies is still in the early days. And a lot of the ways that people try to use their power, is through protest. But protest doesn't only take the form anymore of, standing, going on marches or standing outside government offices. Nowadays, protest, opinion, challenge to the status quo can happen through social media, through the sharing of images, through conversations that are had without permission, and so on. So our power is really distributed through many, many different forms. And in this diagram here, I won't spend, the next hour explaining what this is, but there are sort of 4 quadrants, meaning an internal power and external power, and then the power of the individual and the power of the collective. And the idea that information has given us the possibility of waking up to our reality, top left, has caused a lot of new activity. So this connectedness to information has caused a lot of people to wake up and to change the way that they're seeing their own lives and the way that they behave in society, and also given them the opportunity to disrupt society somewhat. On the other hand, connection itself has also helped us to congregate, to come together, whether we're doing so as you're doing in real life in that room that you're in, or whether we're doing it in Zoom rooms like this. The power of congregating and then being able to share that online is quite significant. Bottom right, I'm talking about the power of what we call cosmo-localism. So once upon a time in our recent memory, localism just meant what was happening on the streets around you. And there was limited power really for you to be able to make a change, because you could only access whatever resources were there in your local community. But now we all live in cosmo-local communities, which means that we have, even as our feet are on the ground, we have access to information, intelligence, even blueprints. We can download whole systems through our computers that can be used wherever we are in the world. It's a very, very different kind of relationship that we are in now. And then feminization, which for me is just a reference to the fact that private life, really, or community life, domestic life, has moved into the public sphere. And therefore, we can now use the language of emotions and spirituality and, opinion, but also feelings. This is all out in the public space now, which it wasn't previously. So in a very basic way, I'm talking about hard power more as a kind of a triangle. I'm going to give it a kind of a visceral feel for you, to think about hard power as more like a triangle, something which can act in a more linear fashion and have an impact upon your environment. So you're impacting your environment. Soft power, on the other hand, is more circular. It's about things coming into connection with each other, about the space that opens when you move into connection, and how that has the power to shift your reality. So I'm going to, so hard power relies on really disconnection between things, so violence or coercion disconnects you from your environment, so that you lose you lose your agency that comes from being connected to things around you. Hard power can have the impact of making you do things that you might not otherwise do. Whereas the real power of soft power is connection. As things connect, what arises through connection makes you more resilient, makes a community stronger, and has a different kind of impact upon the planet. So I just want to stop for a second and send you back to yourselves. And I want to ask you whether or not you can feel, I'm going to give you a minute, just give you a minute to just try and locate in yourself whether or not you can viscerally feel the difference between hard power and soft power kind of in your body. Can you feel, if you think about hard power, how does that feel to you? And if you think about soft power, how does that feel to you? And let me just give you a minute. In the world of increasing soft power, we're now living much more aware of the networks that we can occupy, that are not only the networks in our local communities, but they're global networks. They're very much more accessible to us. Through our networks, we can develop our relationality and our emotional power, and what many would call heartfelt power. The era, if you like, of the internet, this revolution that we're in, is much more able to carry this kind of power than anything that we had before. But the real power, perhaps, of attraction that Joseph Nye was talking about really describes what happens when one person or a business, actually, or an artist can begin to reach people through their emotional needs. So we're designed to have emotional needs, which are like messages from our body, which help us to find community, knowing that through community we will be able to survive much better. So when we notice that we have a need for attention, or we have a need for belonging, or needs for security, the entity, person, or product that tries to meet that emotional need will have some kind of a power relationship with us. And as I said before, this can be for good. For example, I think when you were describing the power of your art to maybe give people meaning and purpose, or generate autonomy, this is the empowering activity of art. But on the other hand, you might say that a pair of trainers will offer people status, or a handbag will give them some sense of belonging, you know, and this is really how consumerism has had power over us, to some extent addicting us to products and to you know, to business. So it's interesting that soft power is not an innocent power, but it is it's easily understood through how it brings relationship and how it gets emotional needs met. As the top left picture there says, giving and receiving attention is a great soft power, and it is the power that helps children grow and help them learn. In fact, all of us are learning through the power of attention. But of course, the internet or social media can also grab our attention and, you know, pull us in whatever direction it pleases. So really the point of knowing the difference between hard and soft power and becoming literate about soft and hard power is not to prioritize one over the other, but to be able to know and understand what power, how power is operating in your life. So in this world, you know, of the revolution and of the internet, the phenomenon is the growth actually of networks appearing on the ground and developing what was already maybe the caring community that existed, whether the internet was there or not. So what we describe as the emergence of community agency networks, which were perhaps always there on the ground, but have grown through their relationship with each other globally. So there's now this global phenomenon of different kinds of community agency networks, which are going to ultimately make a difference in the way that our global networks are organized. So if you look at, you know, I don't know how many of you are familiar with this idea of transition towns or of cooperatives or mutual aid networks, which have been appearing globally, showing the power, if you like, of relationship and the ability to connect individuals to their communities, to the wider planet, has caused a new possibility for having outcomes globally. And all of this really describes what I would call a more feminine dynamic of emergence. Rather than a growth economy, which is all predicated on money, this more softer relational kind of growth of power is having a different kind of effect, gives rise to different kinds of structures and connectivity that's possible, that carries new narratives and new stories globally. So this soft power, if carefully, you know, tended to and invested in, the power of connection and relationship and care, connecting individuals to their communities, to the planet, can give rise to a whole other kind of socioeconomic political system. Now, this might sound like a very big claim, but actually in the work of the alternative, we've been plotting this for the last 8 years, and we're seeing that this new kind of systemic structures are appearing and giving rise to a more connected economy.